All right, we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome to another ACLU of Florida live stream. Your voice, your future, a look ahead at the 2024 Florida legislative session. My name is Luis Sorto. I'm a part of the communications team here at the ACLU of Florida, and I will also be serving as your moderator for tonight's event. As some of you know, the Florida legislative session kicked off last week. And in a short amount of time, we've seen multiple harmful bills that have already been introduced by lawmakers that could have a very enormous impact on Floridians and their rights across the state. So with that in mind, tonight, this event will serve as a space for all of us to have a conversation about what we can expect from session this year, the bills that our affiliate is tracking, and also some of the threats to our democracy and our state that we've identified ahead of this year's legislative session. You will also hear from ACLU of Florida staff and counsel who will set the stage for what we can expect of session. They will also talk about a little bit more in depth of those bills that we are tracking. And at the end of the event, we will have some time for questions and answers. So if there are any questions that pop up to you as you're listening to our panelists, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll make sure to come back to them at the end of the event. All right, so without further ado, we can kick it off with a brief round of introductions, and then we'll dive into some of our questions. Let's start with Howard, then Pamela, then Kara, and finish up with Josh.
Well, hello, everybody. I think I hopefully know many of you, and many of you may remember me. I was the ACLU director for more than 2 decades, from 1997 through 2018. Then I retired, and then I was asked to come back for a little while the organization is conducting a search for a permanent director. But nice to be with you this evening.
Good evening, everyone. I am extremely pleased to be with you this evening. I am Pamela Burch Fort. I serve as the Strategic Legislative Consultant for ACLU. I've been with ACLU now for nearly a dozen years, and I have engaged in legislative affairs for quite some time. The 2024 session will represent my 45th consecutive legislative session. So I am really excited about being with the ACLU team and working on your benefit for this session.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kara Gross. I am the Legislative Director and Senior Policy Counsel at the ACLU of Florida, and I have been with the ACLU of Florida for 7 years, and I am looking forward to discussing what's happening this legislative session with all of you tonight.
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Kaufman. I am a statewide organizer for the ACLU of Florida, working for the Let Florida Vote team, which is all about voting rights, but I also work on free speech, immigration, and reproductive freedom. I'm mostly here tonight to let you know how to get involved with volunteering for the ACLU of Florida and how you can work to defend civil rights throughout the state. So I'm going to share a lot of helpful links and information more towards the end of this live event. So for now, just in case your Wi-Fi goes out or you can't make it till the end, I am going to post my email in the chat. It is jkaufman@aclufl.org. If you have any questions beyond what we're going to go over tonight, or you want to get involved and you can't make it till the end for those links, please send me an email and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here. This is super important. To make a big change, we got to make a bunch of small ones first, and person by person, event by event, that's how we make real change in the state of Florida. So thank you so much, and thanks for having me here.
Thanks all, and thank you, panelists, for taking the time to join us tonight as well. Let's start with a big picture question. We know in last year's session, early on, just like this one, we saw several troubling bills that ended up at the end of session becoming law and being signed by Governor DeSantis here in Florida. We saw the 6-week abortion ban be signed, laws that prohibit conversations related to the LGBTQ plus community and their lives in schools. We saw laws that limited immigrants' ability to live safely in Florida, and many other laws that stifle Floridians' rights. With all of that in mind, what should Floridians expect from this session? And what are some of the issues and patterns that are on the table this year as well?
Let me take that one, Luis. But before we get started, let's understand the playing field. After the 2022 election, the GOP holds a supermajority status in both chambers, the House and the Senate. While we've seen supermajority status in one chamber or the other over the years, it's the first time there has been a Republican supermajority in both chambers simultaneously since Democrat control ended in 1992. Furthermore, every statewide office holder in Florida is conservative. Both U.S. senators are conservative. 6 out of 7 of the Florida Supreme Court justices are conservative, with one defined as a moderate. So if you get the picture, you know that this legislature can pass whatever it wants, whenever it wants. And believe me, that's exactly what it does. Our job is to get the legislature to focus on what we, the people, want. So looking at a few things that are on the table that I think should concern us all, we know that in the last 3 years particularly, several voting measures have passed that were designed to turn back the clock on free and fair elections. Some have indicated that it threw out the welcome mat for Jim Crow to return to the South. There are now additional voting measures on the table. A measure has been filed, Senate Bill 1752, to do away with vote by mail ballots as we know it, returning to the days of providing an excuse to vote absentee. Voters would have to be away in the military, out of the country, or disabled with a physician certifying the disability. Supervisors of elections around the state are calling this bill unnecessary and just plain foolish. So far, presiding officers have indicated they may not have the appetite to take up this measure. But we'll believe it when we see it, and we will remain vigilant. There are several bills filed requiring hand counting of the ballots. This would delay getting election results and inject the great potential for human error, intentional or not. The measure to increase the threshold for passing constitutional initiatives is back, HJR 335. It increases the threshold from 60% required to pass a constitutional initiative to 66.67% to pass an initiative. We defeated this measure last session, and we'll aim to do it again this year. We'll focus our attention on Senate Bill 190, requiring a law enforcement officer to supervise all ballot boxes at all times. We already know we don't need law enforcement at our polling sites. Now, there is a bit of exciting news. The ACLU worked with many of our partners to develop a state voting rights act known as the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Voting Rights Act. It is styled after the Federal Voting Rights Act. We all know that Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore are icons in Florida. They risked their lives and died in an explosion at their home while registering people to vote here in the state of Florida. And this measure is designed to honor them and their efforts. The bill repeals many of the repressive voting laws enacted by the legislature over the last few years and proposes measures that enhance and ensure a safe voting environment for all. We will work hard to bring attention to this measure. Gun safety is paramount to keeping communities safe. Regrettably, on the first day of session, a measure allowing open carry was filed. We know that last year we saw permitless carry pass into law. And House Bill 17 reduces the wait time for gun purchases, while yet another measure seeks to repeal a bill filed after the horrific tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High that raised the age from purchasing long guns, including AK-47 type guns, to 21. Lo and behold, they now want to reduce that age to 18. This gets scary and dangerous, but there are a few good bills. They may never see the light of day. House Bill 279 bans assault weapons, and Senate Bill 130 bans guns from libraries, nursing homes, houses of worship, zoos, public transportation, drug treatment centers, and other sensitive locations. So those are a few of the things I'm looking at, and I know Kara has a few on her list as well. Kara?
Absolutely. Thank you, Pamela, for going through those very troublesome bills with a couple good ones in there. A few other things that we are looking out for, that we know are going to be moving through the legislature, are threats to the LGBTQ communities, more education censorship bills, more bills that harm immigrant communities, and we will also be closely watching to see additional threats to reproductive freedom this legislature seeks to move forward. As in addition to all of the bills that Pamela mentioned with regard to voting, and also making sure that we can preserve our ability to put constitutional amendments on the ballot.
Thank you all. Yes, of course. And I know Kara mentioned a bit about educational censorship. And going into this session, free speech and censorship widely, right, both in our classrooms, in the workplace, in our newspapers, is something that we've already seen to start to pop up in these new bills that have been introduced. So we are aware that legislators have introduced bills like HB 1 and SB 1780, which we know have several free speech concerns and government overreach. So one, could you explain a little bit more of these bills and what they do? And then how would they impact our state and Floridians' right to free speech?
Well, let me say that HB 1, and when something is labeled HB 1, you know that it's going to be on a fast track to get passed. And it is the highest priority, or one of the 3 or 4 highest priorities of the Speaker of the House. So this is likely to pass. This is a bill that would prohibit teenagers of 16 and under from having a social media account. It would prohibit them from anybody going forward having a social media account, and anybody who is detected of having a social media account who is 16 or under would have that account revoked. And I just want to step back for a second and talk a little bit about the big picture, because I think what the big picture is here is that everything we heard from this legislature, and I have to say too from the governor as well, over the last several years about parental rights, I think this bill is an example of how that was just a cover for censorship. Because the most significant thing about this bill, aside from the pros and the cons, there's some bad stuff on social media, we all know that. But there are some benefits and bad things about social media. But at the end of the day, it ought to be left to parents to decide how to raise their children. And what this bill does is dictate to parents how they should raise their children by prohibiting their teenagers from having social media accounts, even if their parents are okay with that. And even if their parents use it, hopefully, as a good thing, as a vehicle for communication within the family. When you sit around the dinner table at the end of the day and talk about things like, what did you do at work today? What did you see on social media today? What got you upset? What did you post? These are things that that families should use for discussion. Anyway, this is an out and out censorship bill. The other thing that I think is startling about this bill is that the legislators who are behind it, I think they know full well that it's going to hit a brick wall once it gets into federal court as being unconstitutional, which means they'll probably be looking at us to challenge it and have the courts tie it up for years. And at the end of the day, find it to be unconstitutional. The other bill that I want to talk about and mention that, Luis, you mentioned is 1780. And 1780 is, I think, another startling bill that is designed simply to censor people. It threatens people who make allegations that they have been victims of discrimination. If you're a member of the LGBTQ community and you believe you've been a victim of discrimination and you call out somebody for that, or you complain about that, you can more easily be sued. And so, great, just what this country needs, more disputes between individuals that are brought into court. And once it's brought into court, this bill, another one that I can't believe any court will uphold as constitutional, requires the defendant in this case, the person who is sued for defamation, to have one hand tied behind their back and not be allowed to raise all sorts of defenses. Like, I saw this person on social media saying discriminatory things, or this person did this. It's like, you're not allowed to raise any of those things as a defense. So it's hard for me to say otherwise, but there is also a thread in the legislature of, frankly, outright LGBT bigotry, and this bill is an example of that.
Thank you, Howard. I'll pass it on to Kara.
Yeah, I was going to say, and there's more. In addition to the bills that Howard mentioned, there are other startling bills that crack down on free speech and that, move us toward a more authoritarian form of government where we as Floridians don't have the ability to speak free. One of those bills is SB 1382. The House number is 599. This bill censors speech of state and local government employees, contractors, and of nonprofits. It censors free speech and expression of state and local government employees by preventing adults from providing their own pronouns if their pronouns do not match the sex assigned in a birth certificate. So I want to take a moment to talk about this for a second, because we saw other sessions where there has been censorship in classrooms, and then we saw censorship in higher education. And this is censorship of adults in the workplace from being prohibited from being able to provide their own pronouns. So this is a significant government censorship bill, and it is a slippery slope. Once the government starts preventing people from speaking freely in the workplace, in the schools, in education, about any topic, they are more apt to prevent speech about any topic. And that is one of the reasons why this is so startling. In addition, it also prohibits state and local government employees from, okay, here we go, taking adverse action against biased employees who create hostile work environment against LGBTQ individuals. So under our current laws, if you create a hostile work environment, an employer may or may not choose to take an adverse action against you. That action could be a warning, that action could be a conversation, it could be some more. This bill prevents employers from being able to take adverse actions against their employees that are creating a hostile work environment for LGBTQ individuals. It is basically a license to discriminate. And it prevents individuals from being able to, it allows individuals, employees that do discriminate to say that they are just expressing their biology-based belief, and therefore it is not discrimination what they are doing. That is what this bill does. It puts into law the notion of a biology-based belief discrimination. It also prohibits state and local government employees and nonprofits and any employer that receives state funding from requiring employees to attend trainings regarding gender identity and sexual orientation. So we saw last session how they tried to prevent private employers from conducting trainings on sexual orientation and gender identity. This is an expansion of that, and it's specifically targeting nonprofit and employers that receive funding. So these are all government censorship, First Amendment bills, where the people that are most harmed by them are LGBTQ communities. And that is the purpose of these goals for this legislature.
Louise, I want to add something. I think what I hope that the viewers and participants in this program understand is I want to go back to the big picture that Pamela started off with. And I think what people need to understand is that this is not a conservative legislature. This is not a conservative gubernatorial administration. This is a radical regime that we are under, whose goal is it to enact a wish list. And the wish list is to repeal virtually every piece of progressive legislation that has been passed at the federal level or the state level since the 1960s, whether that be in matters of voting rights, the expansion of voting rights into vote by mail, whether to the way in which more than a decade ago, the people of Florida enacted Fair Districts amendments to prohibit partisan gerrymandering, the way in which racial issues were tried to be addressed in the criminal justice system by having a bunch of police review boards, citizen review boards, where citizens can file complaints, which is now being proposed to be banned in the legislature. The expansion of abortion rights. Florida, depending upon the outcome of a Supreme Court case, Florida is on the verge of basically banning the right of women to access reproductive health care. But in so many other ways, this is a program to repeal every conceivable, every piece of progressive public policy that has been enacted in almost the last 80 to 100 years that they can get away with. And just to say, my heart goes out, and I am so proud to be associated with Kara and Pamela. This is tough and heroic work in that environment where you have a radical legislature trying to overturn 80 years since the 1960s, every piece of progressive anything they could think of. We haven't yet heard about, for example, reinstating the ban on lesbian and gay adoptions. We haven't yet heard the ban on going back to prohibiting same-sex marriage. But, you know, frankly, it's only a matter of time because their program is not any one of these specific pieces of legislation. The specific pieces of legislation are part of a bigger radical program to repeal the last 80 to 100 years of American life.
And I'll just add on to that, like Howard just said, you know, and as Kara also emphasized, this is not just one area where we're seeing repression of free speech. This is every area that we're seeing violations of our right to free speech. And one area we see just a ton of this happening is in the educational sphere, K through 12, as well as at the college level. And so the ACLU of Florida has actually joined together with a bunch of other free speech organizations to form a coalition to get people at the grassroots level organized, informed, and get them together to go out to school board meetings to let them know what's going on in their local community. So we're going to post a link in the chat right now. If you're interested in joining this coalition and just learning how you can get involved with protecting free speech in Florida, you can find out more information at that link and sign up. And I mean, I highly encourage it. There's a ton of great information in our meetings. And, you know, as someone who worked formally for a local government in the state of Florida, I can tell you just a few people going out to some of these local meetings, to these school board meetings, it makes a huge difference. We've seen this on the flip side where just one person going to a meeting and complaining about a book can get that book banned. And it works the other way. If you go to your meeting, you talk about how you don't like your school board members, you know, taking away your right to free speech, I can guarantee you they do listen. So there's a link in the chat. You can find more information there, and it's just a hugely important issue right now.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everyone. And Josh, thanks for mentioning that Free to Be Fora coalition. For people that don't know, this past summer, the ACLU of Florida did a tour on educational censorship across the state and met with people on the ground in different counties about what they've been hearing, what they've been fighting against in their own communities as it pertains to educational censorship. And so this coalition brings together not only people who are interested, but people who have been working on this as well for years and also want to fight back. And people have been working in silos. And so what this coalition aims to do is bringing everybody together and getting everybody organized, just the way that some of these extremist groups are organized. And it might be a minority, but they're very loud. And so these coalitions allow us also to bring everybody together and be loud back and show that truly this isn't something that Floridians want. So thank you all on that issue of free speech. I know, Howard, you mentioned abortion, and that was something that has been the center of attention in the last few years as well. Last year, we saw the bill that allowed a 6-week ban pass and become law. Of course, that is stuck in the courts, permitting whether the 15-week abortion is allowed in Florida. But if it ends up being allowed, then that 6-week ban automatically becomes law in our state. But on that topic of abortion, to the group, are there any other bills that we're seeing? Will this continuation of attacks on reproductive rights continue this year?
Yeah, I could take that. You would think that after passing a 6-week ban last year, that not that further they could go to take away our rights, and yet they are still seeking to go further. They have filed a bill, SB 1519, that would be a total abortion ban from the moment of fertilization. So as folks know, and as Luis just talked about, they passed the 6-week last year. It's tied up in the courts as we wait to hear what happens with the 15-week ban. But this is not stopping them from going further. And they have filed a total abortion ban from the moment of fertilization. And not only that, but this bill removes the exceptions for rape and for incest and for human trafficking. So they are just, you know, there's no limit to how much they will seek to take away our constitutional rights and our human rights and our dignity. We are optimistic that that bill is not going to move, that it's even a bridge too far, a step far for them to move forward this session. But we have seen them do terrible, terrible things, and we will be watching and monitoring closely. There is also another bill that they filed that we are watching, and this one is by Senator Grahl and Representative Persons Malika, who did the same 6-week ban last year. So they are a duo of individuals that like to make it harder for Florida to be able to access the abortion they need. And Bill SB 476 and in the House HB 651. This is a concerning bill because it is incredibly broad. On its face, it allows, sounds okay, it allows parents to bring wrongful death suits for their death of the unborn child. What is most, there's many problematic things with this bill, but in addition to trying to codify in our statute further the notion that there can be a death of an unborn child when we're really talking about a fetus, the language is very problematic because it is so broad and unclear that we do not know whether or not it would open the door to civil lawsuits for damages against a pregnant person who terminated their own pregnancy or happened to miscarry, or whether it could open the door to civil lawsuits against healthcare providers for providing abortion care. It allows for a civil lawsuit with the recovery of damages. And so this is why this is a bill that we are watching closely. And it's one of those sneaky ones because, if you hear, oh, well, this allows parents to recover for, the death of their unborn child. A lot of people might think, oh, okay, well, that sounds good. But the problem is that it allows parents or any parent, right? So it is possible, based on how broad the language is, that it could be brought by a ex-partner against a pregnant person. There's nothing in the bill that would seem to prevent that from happening. There's nothing in the bill that would seem to prevent an action from being brought against a abortion provider either. Of course, the bill sponsors say that is not what's intended by this bill, but we have seen them often say, well, that's not what's intended. And then we tell them, well, our concern is this language, and they ignore it. And then we see all of these devastating consequences throughout Florida of what is happening with abortion care in our state. So yes, there are more bills that we are worried about with regard to reproductive freedom. And please continue to watch these bills with us and help fight against them.
Thank you, Kara. It's unfortunate to hear, and I know that this is something that has carried on not just in Florida, but in other places and in other states as well. Another issue that was on our minds last year and that also made an impact was that of immigration. Last year, we saw the passage of SB 1718, which was a broad, egregious anti-immigrant bill that attacked immigrants on every facet of their lives, right? From work, from being able to go to a hospital without having to identify and have to say their legal status, and also attacking citizens, right? People, natural born citizens as well, who could be criminalized by this law. Are there any other bills as well that we are tracking that intend to attack our immigrant community this session?
Yeah, I could take that too. Yeah, absolutely. This legislature, the supermajority, to scapegoat immigrants for the problems within Florida that the legislature could solve themselves, but is not seeking to. And we see more and more of that. There are several bills that they have passed, that they've filed this legislative session already, that would harm immigrant communities. I'll just name a couple because there's many of them. The first one I'll mention is SB 470, HB 465. This is a bill that did get some press, so maybe people have heard about it, but it basically would chill speech and protest on college campuses. It's one of those things, again, where they phrase these bills in very broad language, and then therefore it could capture lots of individuals where they don't realize that they're doing anything that would be violative of the bill, because really they're just expressing their viewpoints and peacefully protesting. This specific bill, it chills speech on campuses by punishing students who promote certain foreign organizations. And so the idea of promoting terrorism is the issue here, because nothing in the bill defines what is meant by promoting. And so the concern is that anybody who speaks freely about their concerns on a college campus would be seen as promoting a foreign organization or a foreign terrorist organization. It's dangerous for several reasons, but it would impact an ability of a student to be able to get in-state tuition. It impacts their fee waivers, and it could impact their financial aid. Additionally, it could create several immigration consequences for individuals who are caught up in this overly broad promoting of terrorism on campus. Another bill that they have filed is SB 1036. I will mention that these bills I'm going to talk about right now are all filed by Senator Ingoglia. So just wanted to point that out. SB 1036 would increase criminal penalties for immigrants. And so it would basically increase the level. So if something was going to be a third-degree felony, it would be a second degree. If something was going to be a misdemeanor, it would be a felony. It makes it go up to the next level penalty for certain immigrants who have come back into the United States after having been deported. Another bill that they have filed, also Senator Ingoglia, is a bill that would create harsher criminal penalties for individuals that do not have a valid driver's license. So as everybody here, I'm sure knows, if you are undocumented, you are unable to get a driver's license, but yet you still live here, you still work here, you still send your kids to school here, you still have doctor's appointments, and these are things that require driving. And so it's increasing the criminal penalties for just living your life here. There are several other bills that they have also filed that are not specifically related to immigration, but yet also do particularly harm marginalized communities and harm our immigrant communities. One of them there's been getting a lot of press on is the bill that would basically abolish longstanding child labor protections. This bill is very concerning because, as I'm sure everybody here knows, the people that are most likely to feel like they need to work are those who are most marginalized, those who are of lower incomes and immigrant communities. And so this bill is going to abolish the protections that have been put in place for decades in order to ensure the safety and well-being of minors. And, I think this piece is important because we constantly hear the legislatures talking about, oh, we care about minors, we need to protect our minors. I mean, the idea that we can't let minors have a social media account, but we can require them to work, 7 days a week for 10 hours a day. The idea that we can't allow minors to have a social media account, but yet we can force them to bear children against their will. I mean, this is the kind of just unhinged rhetoric of the supermajority that seems to be saying that they're trying to help children when really so many of the bills that they are enacting harm children in our communities. There are several other ones, but I will save those for another time.
Thank you so much, Kara. we've covered free speech, we've covered abortion, we've covered immigration. Of course, some of the other issues that have come up in the last few years seem to be continuing this year, and that is bills that impact and attack our LGBTQ communities and our criminal justice reform. And so, are there any of those anti-LGBTQ bills or proposals that stifle criminal justice reform coming up in session this year?
Well, we mentioned the bill that essentially would allow defamation lawsuits against anybody who claims that they were a victim of LGBT discrimination. That may be one of the worst. But if I can, before I want to go back to something Kara said in talking about the abortion restrictions. And I want to say this in a way to appeal to the people who are participating in this and our members and supporters at home who are watching this. What Kara mentioned about the abortion restrictions is a good reason why we need people to get involved. If we do not stand up to the book banners, if we do not stand up to the people who are overcome with hostility to the LGBTQ community, or to those like the governor who just wants to run for higher office by scapegoating the transgender community, there is no bottom to their barrel. If we do not stand up and defeat them, then there is no end to their restrictions. If we don't stand up and fight back on the abortion restrictions, just look at what's happening in other states. If what's happening in other states, it's going to come here momentarily. There'll be criminal penalties on women who obtain an abortion, maybe criminal penalties for women who have a miscarriage. There'll be criminal penalties for people who have to travel out of state or help women travel out of state to get an abortion. There'll be restrictions on access to abortion pills. There'll be restriction on access to birth control pills. If we don't stand up and fight them and fight back and win on some of these, they will keep pushing until there is no reproductive freedom for women in this country. So we need everybody to step up for the First Amendment, step up for women's rights, help us defeat the book banners and those people who want to end women's access to reproductive health care. Of course, we will renew this call more vociferously if the Florida Supreme Court allows the people of Florida to vote to amend their own constitution. There's a hearing on February 7th on whether the language that more than 1 million people signed to support a constitutional amendment, whether the court will allow the people to vote on amending their own constitution. And if the court allows that and we win that case on February 7th, we're going to come back to our members and ask them to get more involved to stand up for reproductive health care.
And I'll add to that too, with regard to some of the other LGBTQ bills that have been filed, there is a sweeping and very dangerous AntiTrans bill that was filed that would prevent individuals from listing on their driver's license their gender pronouns, and would require them to instead use the sex assigned on their birth certificate. It would cancel driver's licenses for those who don't abide by that, and it would make it impossible to renew licenses unless you sign an affidavit stating that your application is consistent with your birth certificate, with your original birth certificate. And there's several other terrible bills as well.
Thank you so much, Kara and Howard. Thanks for that plug about the ballot initiative as well. And huge shout out to anyone, in our audience and all of you who got involved, because yeah, it's always a tremendous effort, statewide effort to get everyone together. And of course, credit to a lot of our partner organizations who you might have heard about this initiative from as well. Now that we've gone through these issues, we can take another step back into the bigger picture. We've mentioned this a couple of times, but we've seen this for sure happen in the last few years, that when laws are passed here in Florida's legislative session, we see them spread across the country. We see other states adopt them. We see the narrative change as well from conservative parties at the federal level as well. And so going into the session, maybe bringing in from 2023 as a recap, what are the larger impacts that Florida's legislative session has had on other states and nationwide since maybe last year and maybe going into this legislative session?
Well, Luis, I'll go back to where I started in this conversation with the supermajority in both chambers, the House and the Senate. This legislature can do what it wants, and it does do what it wants. Florida is a laboratory for extreme conservative measures. Many of the measures and the bills enacted in 2022 and 2023 particularly have been replicated in other states. With our governor running for president, many states found interest in his very restrictive and extreme agenda. Our legislative leaders simply fell in line behind the governor. They refused to recognize that they were a separate and equal branch of government, but they fell in line behind the governor to pass many long-sought extreme measures. As Howard said, they are turning back the clock on progressive measures that have been in existence and that we've lived under for 80 years or more. But in recent years, we've seen permitless gun laws pass, the restrictive abortion laws that Kara and Howard spoke of, a repeal of unanimous juries, constant attacks on the LGBTQ community. We saw diversity, equity, and inclusion eliminated in higher education. That is so offensive. Black history standards were drastically changed. And in schools now, you can teach that slaves benefited from slavery. We passed universal vouchers that have a negative impact on the ability to fund what was our world-class public education system. With Florida enacting all of these measures with great ease, many other states have simply jumped in the fray and passed these laws as well. There has been a tremendous amount of litigation going on around these dramatic bills. ACLU has led the charge on attacking and challenging these unconstitutional measures in court. When we do that, it costs taxpayers for the state to defend these laws. So over the last few years, millions and millions of taxpayer dollars have been wasted on unconstitutional laws. Those funds could be used to do what Floridians need done: attention to housing, attention to medical care, health care, the ability to gain access to reasonable pharmaceuticals. But yet, the money is spent defending unconstitutional laws. So Florida has become very extreme, and we have indeed become a model. And many states, and we are seeing now action on the federal level, and it has become frightening. As Howard has indicated, we are going to have to stand up and we are going to have to change what is happening. But yes, Florida has become a leader in the great move to depress people.
Thank you, Pamela. And I know that a lot of the bills that we've talked about and what Pamela just mentioned, it's grim. And it's grim because that's the way that it actually is, right? That's the reality. That doesn't mean, however, that we lose hope. That doesn't mean that we don't fight back. And that leads us, before we get to questions and answers, that does lead us to our last question, which I know we have been dropping in some of these measures that we have done to fight back, like the Coalition Against Educational Censorship, like this ballot initiative to constitutionalize abortion rights. But understanding that, for at least for our audience, for the panelists, it might seem grim, but there are ways that people can get involved. And my last question is, what are those ways that Floridians, that our followers, can get involved? And then maybe in a bigger picture, how can we mitigate what we can expect to be a harmful session already?
Well, Luis, you are correct. There are many ways that our citizens can participate in the legislative process. We have to remember, it's our government. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. And we do have to show up in that government process. But we encourage people to write to their legislature, to email your legislators. The legislative session obviously occurs in Tallahassee. Members are there generally Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of every week, and then they go home to their districts. So on Friday, show up at their office, call, make an appointment, and talk to your legislators about what matters to you. Visit their offices, start a petition, take it to your neighbors, your family, and submit those petitions. Start a sign-on letter and get your neighbors and your family members to sign it. The newspapers are still there. Write letters to the editor. Ask questions in those letters. Write opinion pieces. But most of all, you have to vote. When we talk about extreme legislative measures, when we talk about super majorities, we are not going to get change unless and until we change the people who are voting on these measures, who file these measures, who come up with these ideas. That's up to us to change who they are. And you can only do that by voting. And despite the fact that there have been several repressive voting bills passed, there is still a pathway to the ballot box. It may be challenging to us, but we can get there. But you have to show up. So vote, despite the fact that this legislature has become hostile. We still have to remind them it is our government, it is our legislature, and we vote.
Absolutely. And also just to remember that this is an election year. So while this is incredibly grim at the legislature, it is also an amazing opportunity to see what your legislator is doing, what actions they're taking, what bills they are voting for, what bills they are voting against, what bills they are refusing to hear that they could hear if they wanted to. So, being aware and participating in this process will help you be more educated when it comes time to vote, to make sure that you are holding your legislator accountable for the actions that they've taken during this legislative session. Because there is a huge difference between what is happening at the legislature, what legislators are actually doing here in Tallahassee, and what they are saying on the campaign trail. But the brilliance of legislative session is that we have the proof, we have the evidence, we see what they do, we have their vote counts. And so we can hold them accountable at the ballot box. And so I encourage everybody to join us in voting our values.
I mean, I feel like I just want to say word for word exactly what Luis, Pamela, and Carrie just said. That was just beautifully done. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I think Luis, especially when he said, you know, it's grim right now, but there is a silver lining. There is a way we can push forward and we can make a change. Something I tell volunteers and people I work with every day when I'm out in the field is that I can't promise you that, you know, working together, we're going to be able to change the entire state of Florida right now. But we can work together to change the entire world for one person to register them vote, to get them involved, to get them active, to get them into what's going on in the state of Florida. So really quickly, we're going to post some links in the chat right now on how you can get involved with the ACLU of Florida and just stay informed of what's going on. The first link is going to be a bill tracker we have on our website where we post descriptions of what bills are being talked about in Tallahassee and our views on them. It's a really great information link you can use. If you want more information on those particular bills and to even have a discussion on them, we actually are going to do a series of town halls over the next few months where you can jump on Zoom and talk with our policy experts on what's going on that week in Tallahassee, how to get involved, how you can make an impact. These are going to be really, really great town halls. I encourage anyone who's interested in this to sign up for them. We have a few over the next few months. We're also going to post a link for just a general volunteer form. If you want to stay involved and know what's going on, it's a great way to stay up to date with what we're doing. We're also going to post a link for action alerts for the ACLU of Florida. I believe someone actually just asked a question on how they can get those action alerts. We're going to have a link in there where you can put your email, and I encourage you to put your phone number as well. We do a lot of outreach through phone numbers, especially on events that maybe there's a bill that's filed last minute, and we'll let you know how you can get involved and, kind of defend civil rights through that way. And then we're also going to post a link to our Mobilize page. If you're not familiar with Mobilize, it's basically like Eventbrite. It's just a registration system we use. You can click on this link and see every one of our campaigns: immigration, freedom of speech, voting rights, and reproductive freedom. You can find events near you as well as statewide events to get involved with. So you can go through that and just find, what interests you. I'll say that we have both in-person and virtual opportunities for you to volunteer with, and the time commitment is totally up to you. So if this is something that you have the time and you want to work every single second of every single day on defending our civil rights, I'm not going to say no. I'll work with you on it. But if this is something that you have maybe an hour or two a month and you want to just do a phone bank or sign a petition, go ahead, sign up. We'll reach out. We'll work with you, whatever it is. And, together we'll defend civil rights across Florida. And then really quick, I just want to add for the last part here. Kara already said it, but voting rights is so, so important. It is an election year. If the very least thing you can do is to get registered to vote and go out and vote, even if you don't do anything else, you don't join any of these groups, I would love that. I would love for you to register to vote. We do have a pretty big presidential election coming up at the end of this year, but the presidential preference primary is actually in March. And you do need to be registered to vote for that by, I believe, February 20th. And you have to request to vote by mail for that for March 7th. And I do want to emphasize that's something that not a lot of people know about that Florida legislator did last year or the year before that actually, is that if you have voted by mail in the past and you are expecting to receive a ballot in the mail for this upcoming election, you will not be able to do so unless you re-request that vote by mail. After the 2022 election, they canceled everybody's request to vote by mail. So unless you re-request it, you will not be receiving a ballot in the mail to vote in this upcoming election. So I highly encourage you, if you want to vote by mail, just get it out of the way. Do it now. go request to vote by mail, register to vote. It's hugely important. You know, we've talked about a lot of different issues today, whether it's free speech or immigration or anything else. Voting at the federal level, voting at the local level is just so important. And I'm just going to leave it there with my shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but it says vote like your rights depend on it, because they really do. So get out there, get registered, and I'll see you at the polls.
Thanks, Josh and Kara and Pamela, for all the amazing resources. I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat, but I did want to at least give some space to our panelists if there are any closing remarks before we wrap it up. I want to make sure that I give you all some time.
Josh said it all. Go vote.
I just wanted to thank everybody for being with us tonight and for sticking with us while we go through this grueling session. It is really helpful to work together. We need all of us, and it is just really, it's really important work, and working together with all of you is you know, just the most important thing that we can do. So please do vote. I think we can make a difference. It is an election year, and we need all of you.
I saw a question pop up right now about, can these links be sent to participants? I believe so, yes. And we have, if you sign up for our alerts, those links that were sent in the chat, and you sign up for our newsletters, you will receive our emails that will continue to have these reminders of events, of petition signing, of phone banking that might be coming up. So make sure to register to receive those emails, and follow us on social media as well. All right. If there aren't any other remarks, I just want to take, yes, I'm getting these last minute questions. So I want to make sure we get them answered. Is this session being recorded? It is. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, and you will be able to go back and watch. And so if anybody didn't watch it and you know they might be good to them, make sure to share it so that they can hear all of the information we shared here tonight. But thank you so much again to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in. And thank you for all of the work that you all do. It's not just one person. It is a village that always makes the change. And stay tuned for updates from us. But thank you again for tuning in, and we will be in touch, everyone. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.